Questions of Doom. Hello and welcome back to another Questions of Doom. In this series, as ever, I attempt to answer questions that you send my way using the archaeosoup@gmail.com email address, as displayed on the YouTube channel homepage, but as you'll also see if you have beady eyes at the end of this video. In answering these questions by video, it is my fond hope that the answer is not only useful to the person who's asked the question, but also anyone else out there who may be wondering the same thing. Now, this morning I got up and I dove in. I got stuck into editing an upcoming In Focus video on Ta Prohm, a fascinating temple site in Cambodia, a site which I've always wanted to know more about. It's been a real pleasure actually researching this one. And as I was there editing away, I thought to myself, there's something I haven't done. What haven't I done? And then I remembered I didn't answer Peter Clarkson's question. Peter Clarkson, a wee while ago now, sent me a question via the Facebook page, and about a week or so ago I said, I will answer this very promptly, and then I sort of forgot. So here we go, Peter, this is the answer to the question that you sent through, and it goes as follows. Hello, I studied archaeology, and remember on my first day being shown Lara Croft and Indiana Jones and being told this is not true archaeology. How do you feel that media such as this has affected how people view archaeology, and is this for better or worse? Well, Peter, you ask an interesting question. Interesting in so much as it's a question that I think lots of archaeologists, especially older ones, get very caught up with and very hung up on, I guess. Because actually I think that the impact of Indiana Jones and Lara Croft, while undoubtedly unignorable, you can't deny it, it's also, I think, undoubtedly slightly now mitigated by the work of so many other forms of archaeology, archaeologists, and media. So let's start, I guess, with the central premise, the damage done by Indiana Jones and Lara Croft. It's undeniable. So many archaeologists, myself included, had some seed of inspiration when it came to archaeology from watching, in particular, for example, the Indiana Jones movies, or playing the Lara Croft Tomb Raider games, or maybe even watching the Angelina Jolie movies. I'm not sure if that would inspire you to be an archaeologist, but it maybe inspire you to be very violent and find treasure. And I guess actually that's kind of the problem, isn't it? Is that lots of archaeologists get very nervous about the fact that actually, yes, okay, it's inspirational and it brings people, it's sort of like a gateway to learning more about archaeology. But it's also undeniably not archaeology. It is, in some cases, a form of treasure hunting. It is adventure. It is certainly not very rigorous when it comes to recording archaeological sites. And in the case of especially Lara Croft, it is, and as I've touched on in previous videos with regards to the worst sides of antiquarianism, it is very much stuff related, stuff obsessed. So Lara Croft is on a mission to find a thing because the thing is either valuable or the thing has some sort of spiritual purpose. And then often the same goes for Indiana Jones. When he's not teaching, on a quest to find a thing that has some sort of religious or spiritual significance, some sort of power, and often there are others, the baddies out there, who are trying to get the same thing. And all of this is not archaeology. Your lecturers are absolutely, completely, totally correct to point this out. But this is really where my agreement with this whole premise kind of ends, and the premise presented by so many. In fact, it was done with us. I mean, I remember very early on in my archaeology degree, a lecturer at the front saying, Indiana Jones is not an archaeologist, blah, blah, blah. My sympathy for this fear, this premise, kind of ends fairly promptly, because actually we know that, don't we? I think most people know that Indiana Jones isn't a particularly serious archaeologist. In fact, it's even portrayed in the films, especially, for example, in The Last Crusade, where he's actually climbing out of a window to escape his students. In Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, he talks about being a tenured professor of archaeology and how this stuff is now beneath him, this kind of thing. There is a sense, actually, even in the source material itself, that these guys aren't necessarily behaving as archaeologists should. And certainly by the time you have enrolled onto an archaeology course, you really should know better, shouldn't you? So in some ways, this initial fear that many archaeologists are introduced to, I have little sympathy for. I think actually that the lecturers need to stop worrying about that, because actually if you're on an archaeology course, you kind of know that Indiana Jones and Lara Croft don't represent the epitome of best practice. But you do mention, though, this question of how the public sees archaeology, and this is one which is very interesting, but also I think to a large extent has been mitigated by so many historians and archaeologists and people who are active in the public sphere over the past 50 years, or even more, in fact. Bit by bit, actually, the image of archaeology and archaeologists is shifting. Initially, arguably with the likes of people, for example, Mortimer Wheeler being on TV, it starts off with a very gentlemanly sort of almost a hobbyish pursuit. People with a significant private income who can afford to smoke a pipe and order people round on the site. Archaeologists are seen as gentlemen adventurers, I suppose. That was certainly a very common perception in the past, and this was sort of, I suppose, augmented by TV serials, and then, for example, the likes of Indiana Jones in the 80s and 90s, and I suppose technically still today. But really, actually, behind that, there was also a sense of actually this stuff being very respectable work as well. Mortimer Wheeler, it was certainly a character, but also a character who brought with him a level of respect. So often you'd see newspapers, for example, referring to Sir Mortimer Wheeler's opinion on something. So actually, there is a sort of I think there's always been a low level public acceptance of archaeologists at worst being geeky about something, and being very knowledgeable about a very particular thing, and at best being people who actually pursue knowledge in various forms. Now this, I think, has been added to over the years with the likes of, for example, most notably in recent decades, Time Team, the work of Mick Aston and the people who brought that stuff together, the team, the approach, the format, really focused on and invited people in to in a very unpatronising way to observe, to see how archaeologists go about doing what they do, and the fact that actually archaeology isn't just, again, stuff obsessed and thing obsessed. Now at times, I think in the Time Team series, potentially the character that Tony Robinson was portraying as being the everyman on the show was a little bit sort of stuff obsessed, a little bit sort of where's, find me the Roman villa now kind of thing. But actually he was always balanced out by usually Mick on screen talking about how archaeologists go about doing what they do. And now, and I'm sure you must have come across this as well, many people, they basically measure archaeology by Time Team. They don't really measure it by Indiana Jones. They have a sense that actually archaeology is a bit mucky, not particularly well paid. The archaeology is nonetheless, though, absolutely fascinating, and something which typically people say, oh, I've always wanted to do that. In fact, last night I was talking at the WI, the Women's Institute, a wonderful, venerable institution in Britain, and several people were saying to me afterwards that they always wanted to be archaeologists. And this surely underlines the fact that actually I think the public has a good sense that archaeology isn't about fighting Nazis or finding the Ark of the Covenant. Archaeology actually is a more generalised and intriguing subject, which people can dip their toe in different ways. So some people, for example, last night, were interested in artefacts. Other people were interested in the chemical processes behind metallurgy. Other people were interested in history. Other people were interested in genetics. Other people were interested in social stories and social history. So I think actually there is a generalised acceptance, broadly speaking, that archaeology is more than Indiana Jones and Lara Croft. However, and this is an important thing to note, Indiana Jones and Lara Croft are inescapable, and I think this is a potentially dangerous and also slightly eye-rolling, a kind of element of being an archaeologist, but also being referenced in the public media, in the sphere of public consciousness. For example, Sarah Parcak, the so-called space archaeologist, satellite archaeologist, who's reached heights, no pun intended, of notoriety and public awareness because of the exciting nature of the work that she does. Many media people, especially people in newspapers, they feel the need to prefix her exciting work with "real-life Indiana Jones, Sarah Parcak, is currently discovering things with satellites." Now, it might just be me, but I think actually the second part of that sentence or that introduction is much more interesting than "real-life Indiana Jones." Now, this really is actually where I think we come to the nub of the point here. You ask about how these forms of media, and for the most part you're talking about computer games and movies, have affected the public awareness of archaeology. I think actually what really affects it is actually journalism and the willingness of journalists to listen to specialists when they interview them, to present specialists as actual human beings who are specialising in current topics as opposed to going on adventures in a slightly outdated early 20th century way. But also as well the willingness of journalists to, dare I say it, not be lazy. Now I say this because actually this was also highlighted recently with the release of the computer game Far Cry Primal. It's a game actually that Liv and I are quite enjoying, and we'll be doing a video on it very soon. But with it, so many news outlets, computer game reviewers, newspapers, magazines, the TV, were using vocabulary which presumably they had been fed from press releases or something, goodness knows where they got it from, but in very inappropriate ways. They were saying, go on a Neolithic romp and kill your enemies, this kind of thing, when the game has nothing to do with the Neolithic whatsoever. One of my favourite game magazines called Game Master, it's an old classic magazine now, it was using this vocabulary out of context. And I thought that was a real shame. And what it revealed was the fact that actually it's the journalist who is basically lazy. They can't be bothered really actually properly researching what it is that they're writing about. This is probably because they have a deadline, and probably because they write about so many different topics in the course of their week, never mind their career, that actually they can't possibly be expected to be specialists on everything that they do. But maybe they should learn the lesson that they need to run some of this stuff by the people who are specialists, by the people who they have just interviewed, or by the people who might be able to just add a little bit of authenticity to their work, just by maybe tweaking a sentence here or there. I think that's possibly actually the real nub of this whole thing. Actually, this should be the focus now of archaeologists in universities, archaeologists on the ground, is actually how archaeology is presented, in particular via the news media, and not worry too much about Indiana Jones and Lara Croft. Indiana Jones and Lara Croft are fun. I love them. They're all over the place in my office. I'll probably be playing Tomb Raider at some point one evening this week. I absolutely adore those media, and I think most people have the ability to separate out, and also actually Nathan Drake, that's another character as well from the PlayStation games. They have the ability to separate out these characters from real archaeology. And if they don't, at the very least, they're intrigued, and they have the ability to go and learn more by, for example, finding videos online, or by talking to real-life archaeologists. If they really want to know more, then they'll soon be put right. I think we need to stop worrying, and in particular lecturers need to stop worrying about Indiana Jones. I think we need to be much more aware of, actually, how we are presented to the public in a very immediate way by journalism. And I don't know if this feels like I've gone slightly off tangent here, but I think hopefully I've criticised the point made by your lecturer, or by the person who introduced this topic to you, in a constructive way. I don't think there's anything wrong with Indiana Jones. He's wonderful, and actually I'm quite looking forward to the next movie. Anyway, Peter, hopefully this has been a useful answer to your question, and some useful thoughts have come from it, and hopefully you may even be able to feed back to your course and say, well, what about the modern media? And then they'll go, excellent, gold star. I don't know, do they give out gold stars? They should give out gold stars, I think, at every university, definitely. But at the very least, hopefully this has been a helpful series of thoughts. And if anyone else out there has any thoughts or ideas, please do comment below. I'd love to hear from you, as would Peter, I am sure. And as I say, I'm not trying to minimalise the complicated relationship between archaeology, the public, popular culture and news. It's a very complicated cycle, and I think it's almost uniquely complicated in terms of the sciences and science and human topics as well, humanities. Archaeology has this remarkable, charismatic, but also romantic side that people want to tap into. So it's a very complicated world to talk about. But I think it's one which actually the balance needs to be, and is in fact being addressed. But I think bit by bit we need to be doing more to tackle this. And so I'm not trying to minimalise it, but if you have any thoughts or questions or ideas or expansions on this notion, please do comment below. And I look forward to reading your comments. Anyway, guys, thank you as ever for watching. Thanks to Peter for this question, and I'm so sorry it took me a little bit longer than expected to answer it. And as ever, until next time, do take care. Bye bye.